In Escape from Tarkov, the ammo system is one of the most important mechanics of the game because we have all sorts of ammo for different guns and different situations. Some ammo will do better in situations where the enemies are armored, whereas in some they will do better on unarmored targets. What is important is that you know what works in what situation in order to make sure you have the fastest kill time. In Escape from Tarkov, depending on the actual bullet, you will do a certain amount of damage. Therefore, rounds like, for example, 5.56 by 45 War Mage will do more damage than a round like 9x19 BSO-GZH. The first most important concept to grasp when it comes to firearms in this game in regards to damage is whether or not damage is the most important thing in the game. The answer to that is no, because armor plays a role. Armor in this game is represented by different classes of armor. The most important ones are Class 3, Class 4, Class 5, and Class 6. Starting with Class 3 armor, we have an armor that is best referred to as a stab vest, honestly. For the most part, they're not really useful. They can stop rounds such as 9mm shotgun shells and a few other kind of bullets. Not many, but what's the problem with them is they run out of hit points very quickly, which leads to them being obsolete rather astronomically quickly, especially when you get shot at by something like a shotgun after a few shots. When it comes to Class 4, it can stop rounds to a certain point, much better than Class 3, that's for sure. I mean, Class 4, I'd consider that basically a bulletproof vest that you know from the average stuff. It can stop stuff like 7.62 about 6 times before it penetrates, because the way this armor works in this game is the amount of times an armor takes a hit will affect the overall hit points that the actual armor has. Therefore, the less hit points the armor has, the lower the HP of the armor to the point that it might break. Once the armor breaks, any shots that are shot at you where the armor would have covered will penetrate. Well, won't have to penetrate. It'll hit you directly, and that can be very deadly in situations where the bullet does a serious amount of damage. Then you have Class 5 and Class 6. Class 6 is ridiculously good, whereas Class 5 is less good but still pretty effective. Class 5 is stuff like 4. Class 6 is something like the Vulcan helmet. It's kind of ridiculous how effective they are, but for the most part, nothing is impenetrable in this game. Therefore, something like around 5.56 by 45 War Mage might not penetrate it, but something like M995 will. It can even one-shot you in some cases, or two-shot you, depending on what armor it is and what class it is. Now, why don't we just go for high-penetrating bullets? The problem with high-penetration bullets is they have a lower base damage. Around a 545 BS will have a high penetration, but won't make as much damage as, say, a round of 556 War Mage, which doesn't have much penetration, but has a higher base damage. That is due to the fact that penetration will oftentimes sacrifice damage. Therefore, depending on the actual round, you will have to maybe put more cartridges into your enemy in order to kill them. The rule of thumb is that higher penetration equals lower damage. It doesn't always apply, but it works in most cases. In order to explain how to best use each cartridge in what context, I'll give you a few examples of situations that I have dealt with. A few of the conflicts / combat situations I've been in the game lately have involved me fighting hatchlings. Lots and lots of hatchlings, especially currently with the new wipe being around. One of the more common rounds I've been using lately is BT. BT of the 545 by 39 rounds is not exactly the best for penetration, but has a decent amount of damage, especially for a 545 round. One could almost use 7.62 or a 308, but in this context, using 30 round mags of that stuff inside of an AK seems pretty effective. But when I do end up meeting enemies that have armor, I sometimes get absolutely massacred. Therefore, in those situations, let's use a round of 545 for example, you may want to use a round of BS or rounds of Igolnik, which is a 7 N39, which is one of the best rounds for that bullet type. I would recommend using them if you can, but they're very expensive. Let's use another example of round that you could use. One of the more common guns I've seen lately is ADARs. ADARs are a very popular weapon, especially considering it fires 5.56. 5.56 is one of the popular rounds in this game, although it's not fully automatic firearm. It still fires 5.56, which, depending on the round, can have high penetration and or high damage, especially when you take into account bullets like War Mage. War Mage will do a decent amount of damage, probably two-shotting enemies and or free. It'll black out a limb if you're capable of doing it and be able to do a decent amount of damage. Whereas if your enemy has armor, you can use something like M995. Although M995 might not be accessible at early wipe, it's pretty effective once you do have get your hands on it in order to fight armor targets. It can penetrate helmets such as Class 6 with 2 rounds to the face, which, if you take into account how much Class 6 can erase top, that's ridiculously powerful. Especially in a full automatic weapon like the M4, the M416, or the HK, as people call it. One of the most important things you can remember in this game is that depending on the firearm, you will have a certain set of cartridges, and depending on the cartridges, you must take into account what kind of situation you are going to face and make sure that you are ready for them in order to be able to take them out with the least amount of time spent. In order to find these penetration values and damage values, I'll be linking a officially published by BSG chart of the actual bullet damage, which can allow you to identify how much damage a bullet does and also identify the penetration that it does. Also, it is sorted from good to worst is on the actual chart, which might be a good thing for beginners. Now, good luck out there. Hopefully things go well for you, and I'll see you out there on the battlefield.